Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ion Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am joined across the continent, as always, by your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
Good. Send in the clones.
There we go. Sending in the clones. That is right. That is correct. This week we are talking all about those clones. We're stretching a whole heap of decades from all way back into Legends, all the way to I want to get into some of the most recent episodes of the Bad Batch, talking about that Jango Fett based Grand Army of the Republic. It's a good army. Shout out to anyone who got that reference. If you got that reference, put in the comments. It's a pretty famous reference. Anyway, yeah.
They'll do a
So
good job.
we're talking about the clones. What is their story? How did they got replaced by the Imperial Army? Everything in between. We will focus on themes rather than beat by beat, as we do here at the Ion Canon podcast. First, do the plugs at the top. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Ion Canon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. Also, Tractor Bean Comic Reviews. Every books come out every Wednesday. I try and review them about 5 minutes ish per comic book on Friday. 5 to 7 ish minutes per comic book. Release those on Friday as best I can. This past week we got the High Republic Adventures, the Nameless Terror #1, Yoda #4, and really really great Dr. Aphra #29. I thought I enjoyed it quite a bit. But also this coming week, gonna be interesting. Gonna be wild. As Doc thankfully listed all of that Hidden Empire, ongoing Han and Chewie, hyperspace stories, and I guess it's the Kevin Scott High Republic. 3 of those books by Charles Soule, by the way. I don't know how he sleeps, how he had time to have kids. I don't know what it is. And then to read a whole bunch of other stuff, including a novel. That guy. So yeah, it's gonna be wild. No, like of course, also the Mandalorian and the Bad Batch are coming out. So that same day, and I might be watching Ant-Man Quantumania for the second time instead of doing anything to do with Star Wars. But we'll see. I'll definitely get to the comic reviews eventually. Tractor Beam will come out, maybe a bit late. We'll see. I'll do my best. But yeah, until then, you can other ways to keep in touch with us here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel. You got YouTube memberships and super chats, and of course the Star Wars Underworld Discord server. We got a bit of a. Did I chime in? I came in for a few minutes for the Fortnite event. So if you want to, just talk about Discord generally and the events that you throw on that.
So bi-weekly, would be bi-weekly. Yeah, I think bi-weekly.
Yeah,
we hold either a game night or a movie night on our Star Wars Underworld Discord every Friday, normally around 6 o'clock my time, 9 p.m. Eastern. My time is Pacific. And someone will thankfully always stream the game we're playing. So if you don't want to play with us and just talk, that you can do that too and watch us play. We have a lot of fun as always, and anyone, you're all invited, of course. So yeah, permanent link should be in the description, I hope. If not, then just come contact us. We'll give you a link.
Yeah, just DM us on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. Just let us know. It's gonna be it's fun. I mean, just in the Discord server as a whole, just a place I throw in some things I find on the internet, stuff you're in there a lot every day, hanging out, chatting, talking Star Wars, talking a bunch of other stuff as well. Speaking of Star Wars, we had a week. We had a week of Star Wars. Joel, I didn't make any notes of myself, so Joel, I'll let you set this up. Theology time with Tony Gilroy.
Yeah, theology time. But this time we're Tony Gilroy. Tony Gilroy did a little interview, as he does, and he talked a bit about the prison arc with Andor and Kino Loy, played by Andy Serkis. Yes. And he had this to say, in brackets, Kino Loy, and the rest of the show is, in many ways, are political. But for me, the prison, in brackets, sequence was always theological. That was always religious. And there's nothing else religious in the show, really. It was the idea of a guy who had fates. His God is that number in his box. So the prison is populated by true believers and others like Melshi, who is an atheist. He doesn't believe. These two populations, in addition to others who are agnostic, are trying to figure it out. But to me, that was always about faith. And to watch somebody overnight lose their faith, There is no God. The numbers in the boxes are a lie. And he got with the idea right from the beginning that Kino Lloyd's whole identity tied to that faith. He believes he does the right thing, he will get out of prison, he will go to heaven. And sorry, not happening.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wanted to bring that up because you're our resident theologist, and that was probably the most theological Tony I've ever seen Tony Gilroy get in an interview. So I just was
Mhm.
curious, like, oh wow, what did Matthews think of that? Because I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it was really fascinating, and just I hadn't thought of it in those terms, but yeah, as a parable, if you will, an allegory. Those words are kind of confusing, but representation of hoped for transcendence based on merits, based on getting out, based on how good you are, and to see that deconstructed in that way. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, the idea, yeah, getting out and going to heaven. I mean, here's the thing. He said that's not the only religious thing. It's
Mhm.
still, the faith of the rebellion is it's further than that. The faith of the rebellion is we have to fight, we have to resist the empire, and maybe the galaxy will transcend the empire, which ultimately, of course, it does. But um, it's fascinating then to think of in light of uh, Kino Loy's story, to think of Andor. Andor comes in from the outside,
Mhm.
tells Kino just how ridiculous, not just Melshi, but see Melshi, yes, he's the atheist. Andor knows that there are people on the outside, that there is a liberation that you actually have to just make your way for. You can't trust the Empire to give it to you and to make your way in their system. I mean, maybe in a way it gets at the whole Mon Mothma versus oh my goodness, Saw Gerrera
Lucid?
thing.
Oh,
There's
Bugger.
more Saw Gerrera in a way, like Mon Mothma before she herself loses faith in using the empire system and doing her bit. I mean, it's a little more complicated than that because, of course, for her, she is doing the best she can, the most good she can, for as long as she can as a senator, and then at some point she also has to leave. But yeah, it speaks to me of how spiritual and religious, even the things that Tony Gilroy says aren't spiritual or religious. It's still about meaning in life, about ultimate destiny, and the the direction your life is headed, and those are profoundly religious, spiritual things.
Yeah, I really liked it, and I really liked the prison arc in general. I always thought it was a really good arc.
Hmm.
One way out.
Hmm.
Um, and I just thought that was just a very interesting thing I found.
Yeah,
So that was my week of Star Wars, and that I found Tony Gilroy words.
yeah.
Can't wait for
um
Andor season 2.
yeah, there we go. I'm here for it. I didn't make any notes, prepare anything, just a few things off the top of my head. Started, I guess last week I said I started Thrawn Ascendancy, Lesser
Hmm.
Evil, and getting into that a bit more. Hopefully I finish
Nice.
it by the time Battle Scars comes out. We'll see.
Hmm.
But doing the audiobook for that, and of course Mark the Cannon
Yeah.
Legend Thompson doing his thing. It's that one took a bit of getting into just the whole audiobook thing, but now I'm in. You just gotta pay attention to the intricacies, and if you miss some intricacies, well, at least you get the gist. And
Yeah.
fascinated, especially to hear Thrawn, I mean, making even the memories. I mean, the memories are always, I think, the most interesting part of, at least for me, of this whole Ascendancy trilogy.
Hmm.
Thrawn building this friendship with Thras. I mean, before it was his friendships with, then Ziara and Aralani and Thalius. Yeah, really curious to see the human side, if you will, of Thrawn, and then of course the lesser evil, how he ends up being okay. I got to go ally with the Empire in order to confront this Grisk threat. Very, very interesting, very curious. Feels like off the beaten path because the Ascendancy trilogy, especially, it's almost Star Wars adjacent. It's not.
Oh, it is.
It's adjacent to the galaxy.
Hmm.
It's in its own thing. It's building up to his canon trilogy, and the whole reason he's in the 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 known galaxy that we know, what they call lesser space. I love that.
Hmm.
Um, so that interestingly, I saw on Facebook, in these Facebook groups I'm in sometimes, someone being all, "Oh, I hope Thrawn and the Mandalorian and Ahsoka has some tie into the Grisks. Hope Eli Vanto's in this." I can see Vanto coming in, but I really don't see any more beyond that. I don't know if I'd be shocked if Pavloni actually
I
knows anything to do with these ascendancy novels,
I
especially.
have a bit of insight for you that
All
I
right,
think it'd be interesting to share.
sure.
So Tim Zahn, when he has been writing these Thrawn books for
Hmm.
a while, he very much likes to write them as if he's really just continuing his work from Legends,
Sure.
which
Yeah.
it is. This work has been very much an evolution of just what he's been doing since he started, or
It's
at least
fair
since
play to
after
him, you know.
or at least since after the Thrawn trilogy, like
Yeah.
with the Chiss ascendancy, like there's
Hmm.
no real difference between what was going on in
Yeah.
Legends and canon per se. Maybe some different characters
Hmm.
involved, but like he's so adjacent to it's so adjacent to Star Wars, which I like actually. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't particularly like the books. I find them a little just dry for my taste, but I like the fact he's given kind of like, here you go, take something that's so unconsequential to everything. You can build your own universe. Just maybe every now and then you'll mention a Jedi. But in his mind, his kind of his way of thinking, stuff like Outbound Flight still canon. So you might get references to Outbound Flight, which was a Thrawn story set in the prequel era. But in Tim Zahn's own mind, more or less, he kind of sees the original Thrawn trilogy still as Thrawn's endpoint. That there is a last command like scenario for Thrawn's ending. Now, I don't think he's going to rewrite Last Command, and I feel like
Right.
if that Favloni's more or less heading there, where Thrawn's going to try and take back the galaxy, and then he's going to die.
Yeah.
Goto can't get stabbed by Rook because
Rook.
he's dead
Yeah.
already. But
Right.
same scenario more or less are at play.
Mhm.
So and then he's talking about how he would just continue on from
Yeah.
there and sort of like with his Chiss stuff. So maybe
Mhm.
if he's not going to write what Ezra and Thrawn were doing in the Unknown Regions together, maybe he'll just like,
Yeah.
okay, Thrawn's dead. Now I'm just going to continue on doing my non-adjacent Chiss ascendancy stuff.
Yeah. That would be pretty cool because the world he's developed, everything in that whole the family politics and everything, it's really fascinating, really rich. More so than and just the different kinds of characters and different kinds of yeah, I mean not everyone is so militarily calculated, naval calculations. There are politicians, there are caregivers, it is it's a nice change of pace from High Republic. I mean, I love High Republic. I'm here for it. But nice change of pace from everything else in Star Wars. So, it's the closest thing I want to get. The closest I was going to maybe take a break from Star Wars, but so I'm taking a break sort of by doing this. So there's that. Yeah, I got a bit of a comment from Doc. Want the Force to go Thrawn? I mean, that whole thing with the Bendu and how he encounters the Force and he doesn't fully understand it. That doesn't fully fit, I think, with the novels, but maybe for him, second sight or whatever is this child's thing that he leaves behind. I don't know if they'll even bring that in, but so yeah, that'll be interesting. This concept that's beyond his ability to calculate, this reality that's beyond his ability to calculate, that ends up being his end. We'll see. There we go. Okay, we got we're gonna move on. So yeah, of course, as we're gonna still talk about join the podcast area a little bit, talk about Mandalorian coming up, talking about Bad Batch. Joe, I'll throw it to you. What were your thoughts on Clone Force
my
99?
thoughts. Dun 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 dun. The Internationalists, the Bad Batch, unleash worker revolution. Workers of the world unite. Yep, well, I got myself on the CIA hit list.
Come to Canada, you're fine.
Yay. Yeah, good episode of Bad Batch overall. I quite liked this one. I liked last week's a little more because got that character development with Tech and Omega. I'm always gonna say Echo. I don't know why I keep replacing her to Omega.
Techo, I don't know. Yeah,
Techo.
me too.
Omega. Lego my Omega. But no, it was a good episode all around. I liked seeing them help the kid in the mine, kind of show sure the Empire's bad, but there's always going to be little oppressive areas all over the galaxy doing their bad stuff. The material conditions of people don't necessarily change, or with the Empire or the Republic. Just there's always going to be something to exploit. It's cool seeing the workers at the end, rise up against their oppressor worker person, and like now they're going to share the portions equally, to the no quarter portions. And, a fun episode, and they got their ship back, and they still have to deal with Sid. Sid was not helpful, so I think maybe this week we're gonna finally deal with Sid. Time to finally deal with something with her, because you weren't that very helpful, Sid.
Well,
So
Sid,
yeah,
Rhea
good
Perlman.
episode. Good episode.
Yeah, I really appreciated the way it showed the contrast between here are this group of miners in the mine being taken advantage of versus this family of what and I hope we'll get into this with the Bad Batch and just clones as a family in the second part of this episode. But really, they really play that up really nicely, just showing and Omega's role in that, Omega's place as the heart and soul of this crew of clones who really stick together, even if Tech is gone, or Echo. I confuse the two now. Echo's gone. That they really look out for each other and care for each other, and Omega growing up and actually taking matters sort of into her own hands, able to lead things through. The one thing I found was odd was how that older worker, once he realizes that he's being cheated, he had to have known, right? He says, funny how he always gets first place there in the contest. I thought it was a little too neat and tidy how he ultimately turns as well, or so quickly turns as well. I thought it would have been more realistic maybe if he had held on to his own power base, because that's precisely what the big bad guy was trying to do, was to have him be like the screen against the rest of the workers. But overall, yeah, I mean, it was, again, like, to see Omega really take charge and take this other kid by the hand and show him a better way of living. Right? It was really, really effective, and it really again loved that we had these two episodes to give that time, that breathing room to explore these character themes and character growth. Like you said, you really definitely have to move on to what's going on with Sid. These weren't really Sid episodes, and I know people are kind of annoyed. I don't quite mind if we have more Sid episodes, but there does need to be that reckoning coming up.
Hopefully next week in an episode called Metamorphosis. Oh, bless you. Fourth be with you. The fourth weather be with you. Oh my, must be a big sneeze. But no, I agree. Oh,
sorry, I'm good. Sorry.
May the fourth of others be with you.
May the fourth. Goodness. There we go. So yeah, it's first part of Eyes on Screen. We get some time. Mando draweth nigh. It's Wednesday. Yeah, some preseason Mando thoughts as you have here. Just a few as it comes up. I mean, kind of what we've said already. I do hope they really go for it with what happened with Mandalore, with revealing. It's been 3 seasons, 2.5 seasons in. Give us some meat, give us some juicy details, and show us. Yeah, let Bo-Katan really sink her teeth into this moral gray area. I mean, we overuse that phrase, but I want her to really be more complicated and layered, and have someone to express that with, and have someone to talk to. Maybe it's Cosca Reeves and the rest of her crew there. Maybe it's Din. I don't know if she's able to.
I mean, Din is the star. He should be the one that we focus on.
Well, as in for her to be the person, for him to be the person, somebody for her to vocalize the complex layers. I would like to see her reckon with her sister. I'd be curious to see that. The legacy of Satine, and maybe she believes Satine got them all into this mess. That's oddly and honestly what I'm looking forward to most is with Bo-Katan and Mandalorian lore, because we've gotten 2 seasons of Din Djarin. He doesn't really grab me as much. He's more. Here's the thing, like his armor, I find him more the mirror that reflects every other character that they encounter, especially Grogu, of course. But I mean,
Yeah.
and then of course it's only when he takes his helmet off and stops being a mirror that we actually see him as he is.
I think that's a good thing, though. I
Mhm.
kind of have like the approach of I think that's why this show works. Like
Yeah,
I see Din as sort of if this is like a video game, which Mandalorian is very much like a video
yeah,
game. He's kind of the player character, right?
hmm
He's the player character. Oh, sure, he has character development. Don't get me
yeah,
wrong. I think to say he doesn't have character development is he's not the same person he was in episode one.
yeah.
He likes droids now. He's taking care of his kid. He's got a tone, and hopefully he kind of realizes he didn't do anything
Yeah.
wrong.
Right.
But I also think that's why some of the quote unquote cameo appearances are a lot more
hmm
are digestible because it's like, well, we're seeing these characters through his eyes. So in Ahsoka shows up or Bo-Katan, it's like, sure, we the fans, we know all the characters, this
hmm
baggage. But to the normal
Yeah.
audience, which is still the majority of the people watching this show, I would say, when Ahsoka shows up, it's like, oh, she's just kind of weird wizard lady who
Yeah.
says, I can't help you. Like
this person here.
it's not like, oh my god, you're Anakin Skywalker's apprentice. Remember that time in Morris when she died and then she came alive again? It's like,
Yeah.
Danny's like, you're just a crazy withered lady. Can you help my kid? Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go other crazy withered people. When Bo-Katan shows up, it's like, hey, you took off your helmet. Why'd you do that?
Yeah.
I like, and then obviously you get the new characters too. So
Mhm.
I think it works for him, and that's why I think
Yeah.
Mandalorian is so easy to digest. It's like you get the kind of the
Mhm.
kind of the person to follow, and you can get the lore given to you, but not in like the like, okay, well, here's Ahsoka, she was Anakin Skywalker's apprentice.
Yeah.
You gotta watch, you gotta really hope that you can compress 10 seasons worth of television into a couple hours.
Yeah.
One thing I'm curious
Mhm.
about, and I'm worried about less from the story perspective, more just the fan perspective.
Mhm.
I don't want fans to put so much weight on not just the Mandalorian, but the Mandoverse itself. Like I know people are saying this is episode 6.5. This is the bridge of the Skywalker saga. Like if you want a real bridge, that's what Kenobi is. That Kenobi is episode 3.5. Marketing,
sure.
it was marketed that way. It plays that way. It feels that way.
It's in the Skywalker. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a core world. I consider Mando more like a mid-rim kind of world where it's
Yeah.
like it definitely gives you a lot more context of like to show, hey, how did we transition from our heroes, getting all yay Endor victory to where's the First Order? Luke Skywalker's gone. What happened? So like it's giving you those transition points, and maybe with Dr. Pershing there will be some Snoke First Ordery kind of things going on. There's that one scene where Carson T was talking to someone like, you don't know what's out there. But I'm actually looking at the scene and like, I don't think he's talking to Din. I think he might be talking to somebody else. Because in the trailer, his background is not the same as as Din's background.
Sure, yeah.
So it's like, unless Din's on Coruscant to be a witness for Moff Gideon's trial or something, maybe who knows? Maybe he's talking to Mom Mothma.
Yeah.
So like I don't want fans to put too much pressure. I think the story is going to be about, as like that last TV spot says, what are we without the creed? What is a Mandalorian? And I think that's sort of where the true meat of this is like, what is it to be a Mandalorian, and where are we going from here?
Yeah. No, I agree. And first of all, to back up to what you were saying before, no, I agree. It works really well for Din to be the mirror character, right? Yeah, I'm happy for that. I'm hooked on it. Bo-Katan is just simply even more compelling to me than Din is. If that's not true for you or whoever's watching, that's fair enough. If Grogu is the main character for you, that's definitely fair too. But I mean, it's interesting. It's called the Mandalorian. Right. Never really we assume that means Din Djarin. It could mean Bo-Katan. It could mean any of them. I mean, it really does mean Din Djarin, but it's able to go and actually focus on that story. So yeah, I agree. I don't want the Snoke theory to come out. I don't want that in this series. I do want some more Mando lore, as we were getting at,
right?
For the focus. And then the one last thing we'll say, if there is a connection to the sequel trilogy, if there is a bridge, it is through Carson Teva. It is through how Leia was able to know about this first order threat that was brewing and take responsibility and try and formulate a response and trying to tell the Republic, hey, look, there's this thing happening out there. You don't know how bad it is, and falling on deaf ears, or just saying we can't mobilize an army like this. It's too much like the Empire, and so we can't really respond adequately. We'll turn a blind eye to whatever you want to do, or some people I'm sure actively opposed her. Also, if we're talking about Claudia Gray's bloodline, not that necessarily has much play, it's paper canon, etc. Blah blah blah. Leia's a populist. Leia doesn't want to have a central army. There's got to be something later on that convinces her otherwise, to have a more militarized approach, seeing how much of a threat the First Order is. But I think those things, and I think Carson Teva especially, can play up that aspect of it. Sorry, go ahead.
Carson Teva and Dr. Pershing. I mean, he is a cloner. He is doing weird not technically, both dark side in theory. Empire's all dark side, weird cloning experiments. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to get Genevieve O'Reilly back. I really wouldn't, and she would fit nicely.
I want that to happen.
I want it too, and I think it will be possible. I think one of these 3 shows in the Mandoverse will have it. Which one I don't know, but I'm that's my gut, my just pure gut. But in terms of the Mandalorian, the title, this is why part of me kind of does wish that the Book of Boba Fett was just the Mandalorian. It was like, here's a Boba side story for because I feel like it kind of would make the Mandalorian this kind of semi-weird anthology, where it's like we have like season 1 and 2, that's the Din story. Then season 3 is the Boba story. Then Din comes back for the finale, and then season 3 again is the Din story, but Bo-Katan is more heavily involved because they're all Mandalorian. I don't care what Boba thinks of himself. He's a Mandalorian too.
Well, it's what's his face. Oh gosh, Almec. What he thinks of Jango.
Who cares what Almec says? I know Boba's a Mandalorian, even if Boba doesn't want to follow the creed or anything, and then it kind of would make kind of the ominous title of like the Mandalorian. It could be about Din. It could be about Bo-Katan. It's like the Return of the Jedi thing. Yeah, we could say it's about Anakin, and I agree with that theory too. But also could mean the Jedi as an order are back, or just Luke came back because he was missing for a little bit. So I think that would have been
my hot take, cold take. The Mandalorian is Tarvis.
That too could be.
I don't know.
Could be.
I so want it, but anyway, I will say lastly though, you're talking about lore and backstory and history and all that. I do want to see Din more convincingly step into leadership. Right? There's got to be this season also really needs to be this transition moment from Strider to Aragorn, if you will, right? To actually, not be so just on closed in and hidden and just doing his job, putting his head down, doing his bounty hunter job, but actually, yes, there's the darksabers come into his hand if it's as we think that he's actually going to take charge and take leadership. That more outgoing confidence and compassion, the thing we respect in a leader in Star Wars,
right?
The sense of the needs of a larger group of others, and I think Bo-Katan is going to be a great foil for that, and maybe Moff Gideon's a foil for that, to push against that. Maybe even the Armorer being a foil as well, and so that character story, and I think of course Grogu is going to be the catalyst for it, and has been so far.
I agree. I do think. I kind of see Mando season 1, the Book of Boba Fett, as like Din's arc part 1, and now we're entering Din's arc part 2. Like I feel like okay, he and the kid are one. They're not separate anymore. We can complain about like they should have spread that out, but oh well, whatever. That part of his arc's over. I think now what you're saying, I think that's the arc he's going to now with season 3 and 4 and maybe 5.
But so we'll see.
Well,
we'll see how. I mean, we know like Favreau said that there's gonna be more than 4 seasons. So
there's more to come.
More to come. All right. So starts Wednesday. We'll get into it. We will be part of the podcast Harriet. Even though we do our own thing. We do our niche. Here we talk about paper canon. We talk about all the deep dive lores. deep dive into lore,
Themes.
ideas, as they also come up on the thing everyone else is talking about. Sure, but I will relent. I will condescend. Sorry, that's terrible. Yes, we will get into talking about the Mandalorian and give our thoughts as well. That's what Eyes on Screen is for. I don't really have much opportunity. I don't take much opportunity to talk about those shows elsewhere. So I got my own podcast I can talk about here if I want.
Yeah.
There you go. Speaking of paper cannon, there's some news. There's a bit of news coming out. Came out this past week. Hot Metal Summer. # Hot Metal Summer. We think Ajax Sigma and the Droid Gatra are coming. It was kind of spoiled for me about 2 hours ago when someone on Instagram posted the last page of friggin' Han Chewie number 10. I actually had to unfollow that person. Just do not post any interior stuff like that on Instagram or social media. Sorry. I'm pretty strict about that. Yeah. Anyway, so yes, Ajax Sigma and Droid Gatra are coming. To be fair, that was presaged by Mark Guggenheim's Revelations one shot from November. And of course, it's appropriate that Mark Guggenheim is the one to introduce this and bring this out in his own comic book. So this is the Marvel crossover event of the summer. Charles Soule in his newsletter, speaking of Charles Soule, first of all, if you haven't subscribed to his email newsletter, like open up another window, open up another tab, open up your phone, go to his website. Joel, maybe you should do this right now. I mean, you don't have to if you don't want to, but but anyone watching, anyone listening, subscribe to this newsletter because he, obviously he can't tell everybody everything, but if you want the most he is able to tell you, this is true, I think, for E.K. Johnston and Claudia Gray and the rest, the most they're able to tell you, they'll tell you in a newsletter that you sign up for, that they say, okay, these are people who genuinely care about and are invested in what I'm doing. They want to know. If that's true for you, like it is for me, sign up for the newsletter. Anyway, he released 2 this week, or this month, I should say. And usually just once a month, but he released one just today or yesterday, another one talking about this crossover event coming this summer. First of all, I'm gonna throw this up. This is what he included in the email. This, of course, is the official promo poster there. So Charles Soule says, I'm writing it. I'm gather he means the flagship crossover, but also, of course, the Star Wars ongoing. I'm writing it, but it will touch on the main titles in Marvel's Star Wars comics line. This is a big one, connecting many storytelling elements we've been playing with since this version of the line debuted over 3 years ago. It's dark, I'd say, very tonally intense. I've written a lot of Star Wars he really has over the years, and I wanted to try something different here. I can't wait to see what folks think. Yeah, so subscribe to that newsletter. I gotta admit, though, my first response to this was a little perplexed, only because, first of all, we had the World Bounty Hunters, and then we get Crimson Reign, Hidden Empire. I mean, it helps me explain why. I said this on Tractor Beam. Hidden Empire isn't actually a crossover. It's probably was going to be, maybe, but then they may have pivoted to this other Ajax Sigma Droid Gatra thing, or they realized that Vader, Bounty Hunters, and ongoing needed to do their own Vader things, preparing him for what happens in Return of the Jedi in this lead up, this build up. Dr. Aphra, and of course the Hidden Empire comic that Charles Soule is writing with Stephen Cummings doing the art. Those 2 are more tied in with Kira and with of course Aphra and the Spark and Kofan Ferris and the Archivist and all that stuff. The Formatic Age, which of course also involves Vader and Palpatine. But anyway, my point being, this whole new event, this hot metal summer. It's perplexing because I don't know when it's set, and the reason I'm wondering about that is all these books here, Aphra, ongoing, Vader, Bounty Hunters, the whole Hidden Empire, Crimson Dawn thing seems to be about converging on Return of the Jedi, and especially the books that aren't crossed over, especially the ongoing and Vader line, are about Luke and Vader, Luke, Leia, and Vader. What happens in Return of the Jedi, and of course with Bounty Hunters with Tonga and Valance, that has come to an end. Afra and this Mark Eternal, that seems to be coming somewhere. The Vader and Sabe thing is kind of murky. That seems to be coming to an end too, again, because Sabe is all about Padme and leading, Padme's memories going into Return of the Jedi. But all these things are wrapping up, and so then looks like they're going to continue in this other crossover event. Is this going to be set still before Return of the Jedi? Is it going to be set? Can't be set after Return of the Jedi. You can't have a Vader book set after Return of the Jedi, can you? I don't know.
They'll find a way.
They'll find a way. I'm wondering. Here's the thing that seems most plausible to me, and people let me know what you think in your comments. And Joel, I'll turn this over to you. Your overall thoughts in a minute. I'm wondering if this goes back in a few years in time to the time. So Han Solo and Chewbacca is, of course, set somewhere in between Solo / Kenobi and A New Hope, right? It's set somewhere in there when, of course, all these characters are still alive and doing their thing. I'm wondering if there's something around there or what, just because, again, like these books seem to be ending, and I thought we were going to end these storylines, but I guess not. Who knows? Joel, I'll let you. What do you think of that question when it might be set? What this might be? How this might relate to Return of the Jedi or not?
Yeah. So I did a podcast with our buddy Doc Holocron on this, and we kind of pretty much decided it's going to take place after the Kira stuff. To be quite honest,
yeah. Okay.
We thought
before Return of the Jedi, like between Kira.
Yeah, okay. Somewhere around there. We kind of just thought, oh, this is like, and then we joked like, that was a busy year. I never kind of thought this would take place before all this stuff. I mean, the comics do kind of like to just keep around their same time period, more or less. So you haven't done any massive jumping unless it's High Republic, but that's so detached from everything that's kind of going on at them. Sorry, at the moment. So, we even kind of thought, well, maybe this whole thing with Ajax is kind of why droids seem to have a little bit of a better life after the Empire fall, with like that droid bar and that Mando trailer, and the fact that droids now running the bar on Tatooine. So we thought this was something a little bit more recent, because it's going to be recent in the post Return of the Jedi era. But yeah, it's like I don't know, because again, like you said, this is getting to be a very busy year. Like Han Solo missed a lot when he was sleeping. I'm calling it the Metalocalypse. Love it. Love it. But yeah, I'm very curious to see how this plays, because again, it's getting to be a really crowded year here.
Yeah. That's true.
And Return of the Jedi got to happen someday.
It does, and again, that's the thing, is why are we delaying everything? I don't know. One thing I do wonder, it's not just going to be, you got Han Solo and Chewbacca, and the thing they're after, the MacGuffin they were after, turns out to be the brain of Ajax Sigma, right? I think we know that from Revelations rather. Speaking of Apocalypse, Revelation. Haha, there we go. But also incorporating a lot of many storytelling elements from around. So what does that mean? Does that mean character beats? Does that mean the Ascendant and the Spark Eternal? Does that mean the Fermata Cage? They're also on about different things. Does it even mean, I'm just thinking now, does it mean that Kezrat colony that were connected to the Nile that Luke, Leia, and Holdo and Lando run into? Who knows? I mean, that's even possible. Of course, also written by Charles Soule. So lots of questions, intriguing questions, and as as Charles Soule does best, and as Kevin Scott and so many others do best, you're a lot putting questions in our brains that we got to go and actually read the thing to answer, because as much as they can tell us in these email newsletters, they can't tell us everything. They won't tell us everything, and I don't want them to. So maybe I'm sure we'll get more details. We'll get more details on Wednesday, a little bit when this Wednesday, Mark Guggenheim's Han Solo and Chewbacca, the 10th and I believe final issue of Han Solo Chewbacca is really gonna. It says it's the publisher summary there. It says it's going to kick off this event, even though it's in the summer, but this is March 1st. I mean, I know it's gets pretty warm in California in March. I know that, but still not summer yet. So we'll see. There we go. Anyway, overall, Joel, what do you think about this whole event? How do you feel about it? What do you hope for it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. I think right now, I think the only thing I'm kind of thinking about is when is this set? Like this again, I think that's kind of where my brain's just been at for the last few months of these comics. Is like, okay, Return of the Jedi. Just getting like, just sort of makes you think of like when Vader's walking down the steps to the Death Star. It's like, look, Moff Jared, I had a busy couple of months with my ex-former wife's best friend, and like, and then the Emperor comes. It's like, we had to deal with Lady Kira in the Formoticade. This Death Star thing better work out for us. I'm tired.
That's great.
and then it's like, you gotta wonder. It's like Leia's like, okay, Han, sit down. This is what happened. You were asleep. 5 hours later.
Remember that droid brain that you found? Guess
exactly.
what?
like, sorry. I was like, so it's like, yeah. I mean, although there's a part of me that wonders how absurd this thing's gonna get, and it's like, are they gonna pull an IG-88 with Ajax, and his whole plan is to take the Death Star and make it his body, and then become the Death Star? Are they gonna redo that?
Wow. Is that Legends, or is that something?
Yeah, it was a Legends thing where IG-88 also wanted to do a droid uprising, and he had a whole plan. Right. And his final part of the plan was that he actually got into the Death Star. He became the Death Star. He even like messed with the Emperor by opening and shutting his door to the chambers. Very wacky stuff.
That's an idea. I mean, there's a version of that with L3 being in the Falcon.
Yeah, so like this is like the evil version of that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh!
But,
I hope it isn't 000 and be. Can you imagine trying to take over They try to take over the Death Star. I can see them trying. I can see them.
Oh, they would. They would try. They would. But also in terms of a bigger question, it's like I hope it deals with droid rights, which and Solo was kind of been a bit of a thing with the Phantom Limb. That was been a bit of a thing, and I wonder again if this is gonna, if by the end Luke and Leia are like, Ajax was evil, but maybe we should think about when the Empire is gone, how we treat our droids moving forward.
Yeah. I can see the note in there. Yeah.
That would be something interesting. So yeah, those are just kind of my thoughts. I really don't have much to go off of because we haven't started yet.
Yes. Shameless plug. If you want me to hear my thoughts on these weekly, check out the Tractor Beam on Spotify and Apple Podcast every Friday afternoon, Friday night. There we go. Got to throw that in there. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it now that we're talking about it. Going to be really intriguing what they have. I mean, it's Charles Soule. For me, I'm not just saying that. I genuinely have not seen him miss one. So, we'll see. Okay, one last bit of news story that we won't really get into. Just the other day, Entertainment Weekly. I'll throw the thing up if I can find it. Just that Entertainment Weekly released an excerpt. Entertainment Weekly, the big kahuna. An excerpt of Cataclysm by Lydia Kang, the next novel of the adult novel of Phase 2, Wave 2, High Republic, of course, with Axel Greylock on the cover. I read it just before this episode. Gela and Oren go to interrogate Axel. Really, really interesting character bits, but maybe we'll talk about that more next week. But all to say, yeah, this novel comes out April 4th, 3 days before Celebration. Maybe there's going to be a good Celebration exclusive. If anyone knows, let us know. Hopefully, I know a few friends who are going. I won't be able to go. Joel, I don't know if you're going to be able to go. I hope to the force that they do. I mean, this is a whole other quagmire of not quagmire of can of worms of CouchCon and live streaming, but I hope they do that. But yeah, hope they have a nice little version of Cataclysm there at Celebration that I maybe will hopefully get my hands on eventually as well. But yeah, I think that we'll get to that next week. Give it a week to read it and stew on it, and then get to that next week. But Joel, it's time to take on some clankers.
Send in the clones. Is that a song like send in the clown? Send in the
Probably.
clones. Those happy wacky clones.
I'm pretty sure it's
I,
been done. That's been done too.
I'm sure.
You can Google that.
I will one day. I saw it on Simpsons. Yes, the clones, the clone army. First introduced in Attack of the Clones in 2003.
2002.
2002. I was seeing
I
three for some
mean,
reason.
first mentioned Clone Wars, first mentioned by Obi-Wan Kenobi in
That's
1977.
true.
But anyway,
The
keep
first
going.
appeared
Sorry.
in Attack of the Clones in 2002. We have been a pivotal part of Star Wars for almost a couple decades now. But and their story is quite fascinating, both in terms of the Clone Wars, but also after the Clone Wars. And I think what's really interesting of the clones, their story. Hang on just a second.
Nope.
You're on behind me. There we go.
There we go.
I
The
find
droid brain getting at you behind you there.
yeah. What I find really interesting about the clone story, it's honestly more their aftermath, than during the war itself. Because in canon and legends, I think there's very much a difference in approach for how that was handled. Now, granted, there wasn't much time to deal with it in legends, but for the most part, they pretty much just said, yeah, after the Empire formed, the clones just became the stormtroopers, and then just over time, some of them died off, and then we just recruited more. We cloned other different variants, and that was it. The Jango Fett template clone just kind of slowly faded away. I mean, we got, and apparently in the Force Unleashed 2 novelization, thank you, Doc, for this information. Commander Cody was on Kamino when Vader was cloning Starkiller. Number 2.
Who knew?
So
there we go.
So there you go. So there's your Commander Cody story in Legends. I find it kind of fascinating that canon has taken almost a completely different approach. Where like, no, there is a hard transition from Clone Army to the Imperial Stormtrooper, as Palpatine called it. And just sort of the difference in making the clones just as much victims of the Empire as they were as everyone else is. And I find that really just fascinating overall. But Matthew, I'll turn it to you. Like, what are your kind of thoughts on, like, as I've said, the kind of the differences in trajectory both the clones in canon and in Legends have taken?
Yeah.
In terms of like clones in Legends, sort of like, they're now just the stormtroopers. They're just they're now the stormtroopers now, and they just kind of fade over time. But obviously, Bad Batch, as we see, it's like hard reset, kick them all out.
I mean, well, I admit I haven't done too much in Legends with that, but my impression there, is a lot more of a gradual, more accepting transition to the Empire. Exemplified by Cody being accepting the Empire and just not just good soldiers follow orders, but good soldiers like order and want order and want to believe in this new order. Whereas, it's very much, especially now that we got Clone Wars season 7. And but even season 6 and the inhibitor chip and everything about that's season 6, right? That there's a way, there's a fascinating story there of all these clones, the chip wearing off, and them grappling with the moral implications of what they've done, and how they see themselves as the villains. That hasn't fully been explored yet. Again, in Bad Batch, Cody is starting to. Rex is able to avoid that. He's able to, of course, with Ahsoka's help, able to move past and around that, but then he has to be there to help pick up the pieces. And this very fascinating question then of identity. What are they bred for, and what do they feel about what they were bred for? Even Rex, right? On the bridge of the Star Destroyer, the bridge of the Venator there, talking to Ahsoka just before Order 66. He's very melancholy. He's very not sanguine, the opposite. He's the opposite of sanguine. He's very almost dryly but resigned this paradox that he's living in between, you know, on the one hand, the war gave them their existence and their birth, but the war is a terrible atrocity, and someone like Rex knows that not all is right in the galaxy, and um, that this and of course how many people oppose the war, uh, believe it was a mistake in the first place, and how Jedi themselves are beginning to question it, and so um, yeah, I mean, just the way he for the rest of his life he grapples with that paradox and that complication. He channels it into joining the rebellion in Rebels. We see that, but yeah, I find it more compelling, frankly, that no, they just get more compelling story opportunities. Maybe it's more realistic how many of them just go along with the Empire, and that's still possible in canon as well. But yeah, to pinpoint, like in the Kanan comic, and that's where they really explore this poignantly, is, oh no, what did we just do? And the just the loss of moral center, or the reclamation, the reassertion of a moral center for these clones who are bred as droids effectively, but are more than that. So that moment there, again, as part of why I love Order 66 and the relationship there. Um, a parallel to the relationship between Anakin and Vader, right? The moral core, the human core, becoming more machine than man.
It's interesting, and I guess this goes. Exactly. We do want to talk about the differences in their appearances in the Clone Wars, both Legends and 2008 Clone Wars, which is canon. In Legends, the clones didn't really give clones like individual personalities. Like they had the color armor and stuff like that, but it's like for the most part, it's like they did as they're told. That's what they were for. They were soldiers of war. They followed orders. There were no chips in Legends. They just did it because that was the order. Order 66. And I think that is indicative of kind of the military mindset. I'm not going to say all military people are terrible. Of course not.
No.
Love the lovely, great veterans out there who just do their duty. But the military does breed compliance, and that can be twisted into fascistic tendencies. That's just that's the military for you. It's a hierarchical structure.
It has a way of grinding your humanity down. I'll say that intentionally. I mean, I knew, So what I was, just a bit of a sidebar, and then I'll let you continue. I was in rural Alberta, working in the town where there was the army base, and one of the officers there who I got to know, he was telling me, yeah, in military college, they teach you a course, basically suppress your conscience, and how to put it off to the side if you have to go into battle, and how to say, okay, here's a reason to go into battle. But yeah, it can be dehumanizing.
Yeah, that's Palpatine's whole thing with the war, is just to more and more make the Republic an authoritarian state until it's ready to just change the name. But at this point,
pretty much branding, rebrand
time.
We'll rebrand to the First Galactic. Sorry.
And by that point, even the clones are sort of like, well, all right, Empire now. And maybe the George went the other way with it because I guess from a story perspective, it's kind of harder to see, like, these clones are around these morally righteous Jedi, and they're it's like they're the good guys for the most part, and they seem to their loyalty to each other, their brothers, their brothers and sisters, and all that stuff. Sort of like, how do that that camaraderie, and then all of a sudden it's like Order 66, blast them. How does one it kind of makes you kind of and you could say, like, it's sort of like the Admiral Lauren thing of, like, well, you could say, like, oh, Lauren was working for the Republic, but look, he wasn't shipped. He seemed perfectly happy with his new job in the ISB.
That's true.
But the clones just come off as so noble and honorable that maybe they need a little extra kind of push. Like, how does someone like Commander Cody go from helping Obi-Wan Kenobi to just, well, blast him, kill him. Let's do it. Don't even question it.
Yeah, literally
And
flick a switch in their brain.
exactly. And I think
Yeah.
I feel like you know just with the way the clones are in Clone Wars,
Mhm.
I feel like if the highest authority is saying, "Hey, kill your Jedi General for me," I feel like more people would question it, and some people did in Legends. There were stories of clones not doing it
Mhm.
or kind of just letting their Jedi go, but I feel like the clone we see in Clone Wars and the way they're portrayed kind of just hard to swallow the idea of
Yeah.
you would just blindly follow the order to kill your comrade general. In just out of in randomness,
Yeah.
just randomly by the chancellor,
Or
who now
just
it's all weird.
blindly following orders, right?
Yeah,
And they were the way at least the Jedi had led them is to not blindly follow orders, right? At least what we see in the Clone Wars series. It's also, I will say, the inhibitor chips are a very George idea. I mean, the guy who invented well, not invented, he has inspiration for it. But the guy who brought midi-chlorians back into Star Wars, bringing an inhibitor chip into into the brain like that, very very Star Wars idea, very George idea. So yeah, no, that's a great point about the camaraderie needing some other way of explaining Order 66, and then, as I said, bring up all the other story opportunities.
yeah. Let me check my notes to make sure we are. Yeah, because in Legends, the clones kind of, and in the movies themselves, if you kind of
Mhm.
don't take Clone Wars into account, the clones they kind of are pretend here's where the stormtroopers came from. They got the white armor. They look like proto stormtroopers.
Yeah.
You even hear the Imperial march as they're marching off, and then
Mhm.
oh well, the war's been going on, and now Palpatine's ready to just execute Order 66. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
but obviously, if you're going to make a story about the clones, and the clones are your protagonist, the Clone Wars, I think it's both Ahsoka's story and the clone story,
Yeah.
Clone Wars.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
I think you maybe do need a bit more of a harder reason why these people would just switch outside of just well, they've been going through a war. That's the whole point. They follow the chain of command no matter what.
Mhm.
Especially
Yeah.
when
I
you do
mean,
have,
so good.
especially when you have arcs like the Umbaran arc, where
Mhm.
it's about questioning orders and stuff like that.
Yeah.
These are the same clones that are going to do Order 66 without a question, without a blink of an eye. And
Mhm.
maybe some of them would, but all of them.
Yeah, I mean that Embar arc really does a great job of setting that up precisely, right? That they don't blindly follow orders. They don't just go in and follow a Jedi because they're just a Jedi. It has to actually it's hard for them. They actually have to work through, and Rex and them have to work through uh this whole process of, oh, here's a Jedi we can't trust, because they're also bred for that. But yeah, I mean, as you're saying, even without the Clone Wars, there is that small interaction between Cody and Obi-Wan before they go onto Utapau.
Mhm.
Don't blow them all up for me. The fun, playful thing there. It's hinted there. Clone Wars just expands on that. So, um, yeah, I mean, even just all the trust, even in the Order 66 scene, even the way the Jedi, the Masters, and trusting these clones, even at the beginning of Revenge of the Sith with Oddball, do you copy?
Mhm.
The comrades, these clones are these Jedi comrades, even though they're not as militarily capable or operationally capable, they're still highly trusted, and you have to earn that trust for a Jedi, and to betray that trust. Yeah, great point. It has to be something
Although
else
I,
going on.
I find it kind of funny in the context of Clone Wars. The first episode is Yoda is he's talking about, oh, the cloned individuals you all are, and he goes
Yeah,
over each individual clone. And then when Order 66 happens, he just cuts off two clones' head.
yeah,
Yeah, not even a second's thought. Yikes.
yeah. I
Um,
mean, but that's the great disturbance in the Force that he feels, but
mhm,
also the failure that he spends 20 years on Dagobah stewing over, because how did he
mhm.
allow to a situation where he has to kill these two individuals that he trusted? Those were his oh, I guess it was oh goodness, whose unit was that? It was
I
Luminaries, I
forget.
think.
Oh,
But
okay.
still,
He's
very
yeah.
trusted clones, and then he just senses this. So yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess Ahsoka was she was with Rex, and Rex and her were so even closer bonded than maybe Yoda and those clones were at the time.
Mhm.
Let's see here. And I guess what's interesting, I think maybe what George wanted to add to the tragedy of the
Mhm.
clones, which the movies don't really get into, and Legends never really got into either, is
Mhm.
they're kind of a slave army. Like they were bred
Yeah.
for this single purpose for war, and then obviously Rex goes into what happens after the war. They're kind of
Mhm.
a slave army, for more or less a better term. Um,
Mhm.
and it just kind of seems weird. Like, hey, here's your slave army. Now you're gonna just keep on doing it. Now you're
Mhm.
stormtroopers. You're just gonna be repressing rebels instead of repressing separatists. Although I guess to them it's the same thing. Um, but it's sort of like it's interesting that we're
Mhm.
seeing these clones be a little bit more smarter, more thinking about, hey, what's
Mhm.
what's going on with this empire thing here? Like,
Yeah.
1 minute we're all about for the Republic, and now we're like for the Empire. Like, what's going on?
Mhm.
And in Legends, they kind of just say, oh, the Thrones just easily transition to that. Not that hard for them. Uh,
Yeah.
same system, just new armor, maybe a little shinier, called
Yeah.
stormtroopers now. Um, but it's sort of it's just kind of interesting that
Yeah.
kind
I
of
mean, I do have
trajectory.
one thought. Even without
Yeah.
the chips,
Mhm,
uh, like you said, an army breeds order.
mhm,
It is a familiarity, a familiar structure, and I know a lot of people join the army because it provides a structure, provides this greater cause to be a part of, bigger than yourself.
mhm,
And I think the clone army held that appeal, even if they read into it. And yes, we can talk about them being slaves, being no more than battle droids, effectively. But also, I mean, one of the things maybe that didn't. Yes, there's the chips with Order 66, but the familiarity of it, the order of it, the camaraderie of it, probably didn't hurt. A lot of these clones just accepting it. I mean, I wonder about Crosshair, right? Crosshair didn't have his inhibitor chip, um, and getting to with Bad Batch in a minute. I have a note here, but
yeah.
Crosshair doesn't have the inhibitor chip. Good soldiers follow orders. He actually really believes that, and that's the scary thing too. Good soldiers follow orders. So there's that dimension of it. Um, you know, but yeah, that's the tragedy of it too, right?
Mhm,
Like you said with Yoda, clones have these personalities, have this fundamental humanity. They're a great can be a beautiful symbol of commonality amidst diversity and commonality and common cause,
mhm,
and the capabilities that come from that, both the way to the teamwork and the mutual trust that develops, and the creativity to explore new different ways of engaging combat or diplomacy. I'm sure there was some diplomatic aspects to the clones as well. I'm sure they let the Jedi handle most of that. The big wrinkle here, of course, is the Bad Batch, who are bred beyond the inhibitor chips, beyond any of that. We don't fully know what Omega uh, is her end goal is, what she's the Omega of, but
mhm,
um, I was really struck just thinking about knowing we were going to talk about this eventually, and just not this past week, but the week before, but also this past week, talking about how much they're a family. They're they're not just soldiers. They're not soldiers. Omega isn't a soldier. Omega is a kid. you know, she can't say good soldiers follow orders. She has to say we're a family. We stick together. Again, even though Echo has moved on, there's still that love and care for these people. Um, that yeah, like you said, like you're implying, does lead them to care for a wider range of people and be able to possibly join the rebellion eventually, but um and completely reject Order 66, at all, like with Kanan right there, right?
mhm,
The beginning. So um yeah, it's an interesting question of what George was setting up in terms of these are people bred and put in these white plasteel armor. Then of course the separatists have droids. We see them. I mean, this is Attack of the Clones, right? We see Camino and that assembly line, and then we see Geonosis in that assembly line, and it's meant to show how both mechanization and militarization really grind everyone down. Um, we're supposed to see both the comparison and the contrast. And of course, Attack of the Clones, as you said, doesn't fully go into the contrast between the clones as people versus the droids as droids. And that's another fascinating thing. The droids have a bit of spunk and personality, but not to the same extent, right? Not to the same extent as L3 or 3PO or whoever. But yeah, I mean, the Clone Wars, and even that again, that interaction with Cody and Obi-Wan in Revenge of the Sith really does go into the difference. And yeah, so you talk about persons who are enslaved to a certain task that they didn't choose into. They were conscripted from birth. It's a weird concept, but yeah.
I was thinking about, what you were talking about, the interesting thing about the clones, and maybe this is why they're going for such a hard transition in canon, is the clones, they good soldiers follow orders and all that. But I've always felt the clones had a sense of overall community, at least with each other. Like, we are brothers. Like Omega has a family. She has billions of bajillions of brothers. All the clones see themselves as brothers. Yeah, they follow orders, but there's sort of a loyalty to the fellow clones. There's a community. Community.
Like, she even says that about Crosshair, right?
Yeah.
He's my brother.
Community. Woo, yeah. Well, there is something to be said about the army as like the closest thing to socialist implemented organization America has because of the healthcare and stuff. And just the free housing.
That's sadly true.
It's true. The civilians should get it too. But like even in the army, you're supposed to. The hope is that it's your brothers. You're not just your fellow soldiers. They're your brother. You look out for each other. And the clones, I think, are bred to believe that as well. And I'm sure the Jedi definitely encourage that as well. So when Palpatine's getting rid of the clones, even though, they blindly follow orders, they're also kind of this weird community onto themselves. Palpatine gets his own army. They'll blindly follow orders too. But he's getting an army of kind of everyone's out for themselves. It's an individual, like every soldier is part of the army, but every stormtrooper is like a little mini army of one in that they're probably thinking more about themselves and how to advance their careers in a very Sith-like fashion.
Yeah.
So
it's very true for the officers. Yeah.
Very true for the officers as well. So it's like no one's bothering to kind of team up with each other. They're all busy stabbing each other in the back. And that just leaves Palpatine's like, well, I don't have to worry about a slave army realizing, hey, we're all together. We're all the same. Let's rise up against our masters. Now we have an army of just individuals who are only looking for number one themselves, and they won't have the chance to unite and then dethrone the emperor. So he's kind of made himself coup-proof in that regard. Although there were attempts, but a very self-serving.
I mean, it gets to the question, isn't there much about conscription in the Empire? Like the whole difference is that the Imperial Stormtroopers and the Imperial Army, and in canon, the Imperial Army are the Imperial Stormtroopers. I know Legends is murky on that. But they're still volunteers, and they're still recruits sign up. Would you think the Empire would do conscription more? I mean, maybe they do, and we haven't seen that story. I don't know. But at the very least, to your point, they volunteered for reasons that they chose to be part of this violent regime, be the face of this violent regime, also en masse, and they're far more expendable. I mean, the stormtroopers are way more like the battle droids, these expendable cannon fodder, just like TIE fighters are expendable cannon fodder. You just send hundreds of them out there just to be shot down. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Maybe that's that the clone army had both it had the military discipline and the community, and the Imperial Army just has the military discipline, if that. And that's part of it too. Is if you're just for number one, you definitely see that among the officers for sure. it's not a meritocracy. It's very much a plutocracy where the the best officers aren't promoted because they're not necessarily the most manipulative. And I mean, that's it's almost a wonder Thrawn gets to where he is, because he's not at all manipulative. He's all just talented. I mean, he has this funny end around with Palpatine. Um, but yeah, I mean, that is ultimately the Empire's downfall, is they don't have quality people like the clone army did, like clone officers, and of course the Jedi. But yeah, primarily uh, these clone officers are really committed to the good of the galaxy in their own way, even though they are an army. Whereas, yeah, the Imperial officers, yes, they say that they stand for order, but that kind of order, it always curves in on yourself and says, okay, I got to preserve my own skin here.
Right. I mean, I looked it up. You're right. There is no conscription in the Empire.
Mhm.
There, but although the Stormtrooper Corps is still technically considered its own individual thing, at least according to source books.
Yeah.
On screen it
That's
gets
just
always a
not,
little.
yeah, like that's
On
just not the
screen,
way the story on screen shows it.
that's one of those weird. That's one of those. Oh yeah, that's one of those source books things where it's
Yeah.
like it's just a visual.
Yeah.
But like it's like stormtroopers, bad guys. There you go.
Yeah.
You don't need. I mean, it doesn't really matter. You don't need the minutia for the storytelling. It's
That's
like
true.
here's the Empire. They're bad guys.
They're named after the Nazis,
Yeah. They're maybe you get a little bit more into like the minutia with like okay, here's the ISB with Andor because
Yes.
Andor's a spy thing, so you need the
Mhm.
evil spy organization. Um,
Mhm.
I guess maybe you want the Imperial Army with like Solo because you don't want the idea of Solo being a stormtrooper might be a little too much. But like, okay, he was just a schmuck army man. Because
A
that's
mud
because
trooper. He's a mud trooper.
he was a mud trooper, so he was in the army, but he wasn't technically a part of the elite stormtrooper corps. So doing the real work of the Empire, the real work. But I think with the volunteers, it's like you want those who are going to be the most blindly loyal to getting as
Yeah.
much of the true believers as possible. Although again, this is sort of you see this a lot in Aftermath
Mhm.
and kind of the whittling down of the Empire. At its height, the Empire wasn't just made of the radical true believers. You had opportunists. You had people just wanting a job. Like you joined the Stormtroopers not because
True.
I believe in Palpatine. It's like I
Yeah.
just want to. I need to work and I gotta feed my family.
Why do people work at
So
McDonald's or wherever? I mean, no shade on them. Why do people work for Amazon?
yeah,
That
I
kind of thing.
mean, heck, that's why people join the army because let's
Yeah.
face it, in our society, sometimes that's the only way to get out of your
Yeah.
rural your kind of life if
Yeah.
you make something of yourself and get those benefits.
Yeah. It's a good job.
It's a good job, good pay,
Yeah.
good health, and get the health care and the loans and stuff like that. So,
So
uh,
on that note, then I'm just thinking, aiming back to our topic, it's interesting then breeding these people for this army. It's convenient for a flash operation of this 13-year, whatever, however long it is, thing where you need to turn this massive army quick. But it didn't really instill any sort of real loyalty to the Empire or real loyalty to the Republic. It instilled a loyalty to each other. Of course, it doesn't matter because Palpatine was going to dissolve the Republic in the first place in the end. But you see how the clones end up inspiring the Rebel Alliance, helping out with the Rebel Alliance, just being that core. I mean, even for Ahsoka, and the way Rex, if Rex is not there, is Ahsoka who she becomes. Those are personal character moments that the stories have contributed to. But even for us to watch them, we are cheering for this clone army in a way that we are not cheering for the Imperial stormtroopers. Of course, when you think about it more deeply, it gets more complicated than that. Even the whole filmmaking technique, where all throughout Clone Wars, I read this somewhere. All throughout Clone Wars and in Attack of the Clones: Revenge of the Sith. So usually, the convention of cinema is
yeah,
the good guys go from the left,
Mhm.
and the bad guys go from the right.
Yeah.
In Clone Wars and the films, the clones go from the right and the bad guys come from the left. Bad guys, whatever, the separatists, and that is a little bit of a visual cue to say there are heroes on both sides, evil's everywhere, but also they are ultimately just a means to an end. But I do think it's part of what backfires. I mean, that's the thing about Palpatine, is everything he hopes to do, he has success for a good few decades, but then with Anakin, of course, ultimately, but also I think everything, the clones and everything, ultimately backfires on him. Yeah.
I mean, it does seem with the clones, at least it's not going to look good for them, because you don't see a lot of them by the time of
True,
Rebels. We're
yeah.
just Rex and his posse.
I mean, they're also old. They probably die of old age. And
That's true. They do have
complications.
accelerated aging. And it's accelerating. It's accelerating.
Except for Boba Fett and Alpha and Omega. But
I mean, he's an unaltered clone.
yeah, exactly. So
And so is Omega, technically.
mhm.
But what I find really interesting, also, to kind of get back to how Legends and Canon have portrayed the clones, is, we talked about a lot of Bad Batch.
Mhm.
Will we see a clone rebellion? And this is a big thing, like, oh, the Battlefront mission, yay! Well, here's the thing about the Battlefront mission.
Mhm.
I actually thought about just a couple of days ago, and I'm like, you know what? The Battlefront mission doesn't really have much going for it. The Kaminoans just breed another army, and then they just have it attack the Empire.
Yeah.
It's not much of a clone rebellion so much as like, let's just make more of you guys, and we're going to make you loyal to us, and
So
go out.
when is this? I'm foggy on when this is. Like the PlayStation, the 2000s Battlefront, right?
Yeah, this is Battlefront 2.
Okay.
This is Battlefront. If you want like the in-universe,
Not the Inferno Squad Battlefront 2, but the
the old LucasArts Battlefront 2. Let me see if I can actually find. Did you want the in-universe
no, that's
date?
fine. I was just curious when did this happen? Okay.
Oh, yeah,
I know we've heard about a clone rebellion. Obviously, with Bad Batch, it isn't happening. But anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, this is Battlefront 2. 12 BBY was when this Legend event happened. So
Okay.
But we all kind of want a clone rebellion of some sorts, because we think about that. We've got about that video game level. But I think in Bad Batch, if they are going to actually do a clone rebellion, like a real life, honest to goodness clone rebellion, it will be clones serving the Empire rebel against the Empire, because they're like, I don't want this. I don't like what the Empire is doing. I'm a soldier, not a police officer. I'm not a security.
I hope it's not because they're just bored, but
yeah, that too.
some might
like
be.
not getting paid either. But they kind of go like, Rex is definitely doing some stuff. Cody's in Bad Batch. He's like, I'm out of here. I'm going AWOL. Where he gone, I don't know. So I really think that this might actually be a honest to goodness clone rebellion against, where the clones are like, we don't want the stormtroopers or the Empire anymore. Although obviously it's gonna probably go terrible, because we still got 25 years to go of Empire.
Yeah. Well,
and
they don't know that.
They don't know that, and obviously we know that we see some clones in Kenobi's time, and it's not looking good for them.
Like the Fire First on the street there.
Yeah. So
I mean, you even see in Bad Batch talking about the legislation, because talking about this hard reset. It's a mandated reset. The Senate passes a bill that, of course, Palpatine pushes through. That Rampart pushes through. Chuchi does her darndest to stop it. But ultimately, we know it gets passed. It's a real loss of identity. You saw those clones talking about it in the cafeteria there. Real loss of identity, real loss of purpose. That could really be dangerous. That could be a powder keg. That could lead to a lot of discontent, a lot of boredom and discontent, and trying to find another purpose, either through violence, railing against the system, or I think with what the Bad Batch shows, and what Rex and Echo are going to show, more constructive means of actually helping people. So yeah, again, flipping on its coin, I do. I mean, yeah, it's a fun sci-fi story. I do think with Rampart destroying Camino is definitely a nod, is explicitly telling the audience, no, this is not going to happen. This large scale clone rebellion. So, and it's a very smart tactic by the Empire, by Rampart to do this. Of course, again, ends up stabbing himself in the back by that. But yeah, it's definitely more of a story driven. Yeah, as you said, a more personal story driven reason. We won't necessarily see a large scale history of this, but like I said with the Bad Batch a few weeks ago in the Eyes on Screen segment, the Bad Batch, they are our personal lens into a wider history, the way Ahsoka and Rex were our personal lens into the history of the Clone Wars. And just the way Luke, Leia and Han, and Ezra and Sabine, etc., and Rey, Finn, Poe are our personal lens into these wider histories as well. They just happen to be more significant pieces in that history, especially the Skywalker family. But yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a challenge, always a challenge for the scriptwriters to make a personal story feel big enough, feel significant enough. I think they can do it. I think they will do it. But yeah, maybe that's how it is to show really compelling personal stories, knowing, of course, I mean, the tragedy that it doesn't ultimately succeed, right? The only way the Empire actually falls, of course, is I mean, through the personal story of Luke and Anakin. But then in the aftermath of the collapse of the Empire, because of, again, like you said, of all those petty warlords. If they were clones, and with Jedi, I think the shattered Empire wouldn't shatter, but it wouldn't necessarily be an empire either. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that would have been interesting if the clone army had stuck around and the emperor was dead. Like, what do they do? It's like, who do they obey? At least with individual recruits, it's like, well, let's just opportunist. Got to stick with my commander here. Going warlord. Also, I was thinking a couple of other things too. In episode 3 with Crosshair of season 2, I found one of the most interesting thing is, the clones were sent to do the operation against the droids, but then when it was time to occupy the planet and do some good old fashioned repression, they send in the stormtroopers. So like that's another indication like the Empire don't entrust the clones with just civilian repression. At least not anymore. I mean, we saw a little bit of that in the early days for sure. But I think as time moves on, they're realizing, oh, these clones aren't very good at being just glorified police officers. They have to.
yeah.
They are at least a good chunk of them might not be. They were good. We're fighting large armies, but when it comes to fighting the civilian population and putting them down, your place civilian. We better just send stormtroopers to start doing good old fashioned beatings and whatnot.
That's true. I mean, season 1, the chain codes and all that whole scene on that planet. Yeah, versus now, yeah, they, but I mean, after Palm Krell, after the Umbaran arc, can you really trust clones to blindly follow orders, right?
Yeah, so I thought that was interesting as well. I thought I had another point and then I kind of lost it. But maybe that was the warlord thing. But yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting kind of look at another reason why maybe Palpatine wants. Oh yeah, now I remember why. Symbolism. I maybe Palpatine's a little worried that obviously the clones are too much of a symbol of the Republic, and he's trying to go as fast as he can to like just wipe it clean. Jedi, what Jedi? We're no such thing as Jedi. We didn't have Jedi around here. Republic, what Republic? We got like just Star Destroyers, new symbols, Empire. Let's go.
TIE fighters.
Yeah,
everything's super quick. I mean, or if someone does want to remember the Jedi, and the Republic, he has to remind them they were so corrupt, and I came in and cleaned them up.
Right.
Is that so? I mean, to say, yeah, interesting. The white gleaming shiny clone troopers are trying to twist them into being a symbol of Republic corruption. I don't know. Maybe that's why he wipes them out instead.
Well, time for the new era. So he's trying to get the new era started as quickly as possible, so that even though it's 5 years like Republic, we didn't have a Republic. It's always been an empire. That.
Yeah.
well, even though Battleground's like, oh, just there, I was there, like
I wore the T-shirt.
exactly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but I'm trying to think, but yeah, that's kind of all I got on the
Hmm.
clones, the clone army.
Hmm.
Tale of tragedy, fascism, oppression, community, and some even how we treat our
Yeah.
veterans. Sadly,
Weird
so
science. Yeah.
you know,
Yes, how we treat veterans. It's true.
you know, so they've sadly been they are the forgotten generation of
Hmm.
clones. You know, the Clone Wars is their Vietnam.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought too. That's another part of the tragedy is the clones got Palpatine to where he is.
Mhm.
I guess any clone that wanted to retire as a loyal member of the Empire was given some respect. But yeah, no, it's very similar to the way veterans are treated. If you like, I mean, you saw with Senator Chuchi, right? She advocating for a good retirement plan for them, right? As opposed to Rampart and them said, no, we're gonna just throw them to the wolves. Uh, yeah, I mean, all the soldiers who went to Vietnam, not the ones who defected, came up here across the border. Not defected, you know, sought
AWOL.
sought asylum and resisted and refused to fight. The ones who actually went to Vietnam and came back, the ones who went to World War II and came back, Afghanistan, fighting these wars for American supremacy, and how
World
are
War
they
II a little
treated?
less so, but
Yeah, but I mean the trauma and the impact of that, and
oh yeah,
I guess they were treated okay back then. But soldiers coming back from Afghanistan and Iraq,
Korea.
like Korea, but again, even more recently, right? Um, yeah, it's an indictment on our society that we throw these folks in there saying, "Look how great of a job you're doing for us," but we're not going to actually use the resources that you secured for us for your welfare. Yeah.
And we're gonna make
Um,
a new army that just its job is just to oppress the people back home.
yeah. So
Uh,
yeah, and again, I mean, fodder for the more you tighten your fist, the more star systems fall through your fingers. Fodder for Rex and others joining the rebel alliance, like you said.
yeah, I mean, yeah, and it's kind of interesting again that in canon Palpatine got rid of the clones so early on in his reign. I mean, I don't know when the official, by the time I don't know when eventually they're all gone. I
Yeah,
mean, I'm sure there's going to be always a few stragglers, a couple
yeah.
old veterans who are just trading new recruits, but it
Mhm.
does seem like a faster transition. Like you're going to be phased out really quick.
I mean, I
Um,
think that's the end game for Bad Batch.
right.
Yeah. So
Uh, whether or not that means phase out, here's our phase out station,
mhm.
kaboom, you're all dead, or just,
Right.
well, you're just out of a job,
Yeah.
ultimate long unemployment lines,
Yeah.
uh, just of Django Fett clones walking around.
Or
Um,
welfare checks or whatever.
I do kind of wonder though, obviously I think some of that is just the aging process of they're
Mhm.
probably just gonna die out really quick. But I do wonder, it's like,
Mhm.
where did all these millions of clones go? Like, did some become bounty hunters too? Like, there's a bajillion of you out there. There's a
Yeah.
bajillion little Boba Fett's out there. Jango Fett. Where'd you all go? Like, did the Empire just like kick them out and like, well, save to yourself? Or did they at least
Yeah.
worry about like, what if some of them start getting weapons and get all rowdy? Like, I
True.
wonder if there is like, I wonder if Palpatine will be a little bit more. Of course, here is your pension checks perfectly for
Yeah.
this economy. We're not, even though we're not going to change it when the prices go up and you can't afford a house anymore. But that's okay. We're not, but you don't have to worry about that
I
now.
mean, if anything, you could see him be more
What's
conciliatory to Chuchi, right?
what's
Say
inflation?
what's inflation. If anything, say to incorporate. I mean, the way incorporating Chuchi's argument against her,
Mhm.
um, in this sense too, incorporating her point of clone welfare just to appease them until they die off. And there is another question: where they all get buried? I guess they all got incinerated. Maybe. I mean, cremation's a big thing. That's a whole other kettle of fish.
I mean, I do wonder now if like, is Palpatine going to be more carrot and sticks than just good
Mhm.
old fashioned? Well, just line him up and shoot him. It's like, is he
Yeah.
gonna phase him out? And like, it seems like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't seem that bad.
Mhm.
and then once you realize, oh shit, this actually is bad. This is terrible.
Yeah.
I kind of am wondering now if that sort of fast phase out
Mhm.
will, like Palpatine, like, all right, well, I'll give the clones pension checks. They
For
won't mean much in the long term, but that's okay.
yeah.
And then then the stormtroopers come, and then things just get worse.
Right. So, and then you got Rex, Gregor, and Wolf out on that planet. On
And
that,
hopefully Cody. Hopefully Cody
and hopefully
eventually.
Cody. But I mean the three on Rebels.
Oh yeah.
That was great. So yeah.
But yeah,
Mm.
that's all I got for the clones. They've been part of Star Wars since 2002, and they've hopefully Bad Batch will continue just
Mhm.
their story. And I'm very curious where it all ends with them. Not happily, but I
Yeah.
just wonder.
It does speak to the compelling staying power of them, that
Mhm.
kind of like battle droids and just destroyers were still telling these stories of these clones. Yeah, it's a
I mean, we still see
more
battle
to me.
droids in Mandalorian, so
There we go. True, and in Jedi Fallen Order, and then everywhere, but also
Mhm.
all the way in Mandalorian too. So yeah, but even Book of Boba Fett, seeing Boba Fett's story, that tying that in as well. Yeah, uh, there's something compelling. George Lucas has a compelling way of introducing story concepts that are lasting for decades and decades. But yeah, I think that is a good point to wrap things up. Thanks everyone for joining us on the various places we are on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch, on Twitter, and on Twitter. Please do. Yeah, and thanks for joining us. If you, what do you think of the clones? Do you love them? Are you concerned for them? Do you think they're going to get a good happy retirement in the sunset, or be kicked to the curb? Let us
or
know
as
in
I
the comments.
say, sent to the clone farm.
To the clone farm. Oh gosh. Let us know in the comments below, or on Twitter or Instagram at Ion Cannon Pod, on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube Facebook page. Please do give this video a like and a subscribe, or a like and a share rather, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID2021 on Twitter. Again, JID2021 on Twitter. Follow us at the Ion Cannon Pod. You see the bottom there, where I post lots of tweets and stuff about various things. And of course, you could always find me on the Star Wars Underworld Discord. We are hoping to have a little bit of a fun after show for The Mandalorian this week. So for all you folks out there brave enough to endure the midnight or whatever time on the Eastern coasts you're doing, join us. We'll be talking about it. We won't get to watch it because Disney Plus and Discord don't mix, but we'll talk about it for a little bit. So join us. We'll have fun.
Right on. Yeah, I'm sure those are going to be really fun. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be awake at 4 a.m, but yeah, if you are awake at the 4 a.m, all power to you. Join in. Lots of great conversations to be had. You can find me on Twitter at NEUG485, Instagram at MNEUG1138. I will definitely be tweeting about soccer now that the MLS season is back, but also, yeah, probably about Mandalorian, probably a Bad Batch. Who knows? And of course, also at Ion Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. And of course, also on Instagram, same account. Tractor Beam, hopefully Friday, maybe Saturday this week. But on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, as well as the full every Ion Cannon episode on the Ion Cannon feed on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Yeah, and then of course, shout out to our overlords, our flagship Star Wars Underworld, the network, and the Facebook group, and the Discord, and everybody doing wonderful work over there. Check them out on Thursdays as usual. Next week, check us out Monday night, same bat time, same bat channel, DC. So 8 p.m., 5 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific. Nope, the other way around. 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. It's late. I'm tired. Yeah, we're going to another deep dive. We are talking about Dave Filoni and George Lucas, and again the differences between the two in terms of perspectives and ideas. I think there's a Tumblr post you found, or
Yes, I guess I'll shout out to this person right now. His
yeah,
name is David Talk Star Wars. We will put the link next
Yes.
week on
Yes.
our Discord. So if you're listening out there, because I know I gave you the link because we talked, thank you for inspiring this next conversation we'll be having about the Master and Apprentice.
Yes, it's gonna be pretty interesting. Yeah, and we'll get into that. I don't need to set that up right now, but yeah, I suspect it'll get into deeper, in-depth discussion as we do here on the Iron Canon podcast. But until then, Joel, let's go blow some clankas.
Yeah, get them clankers and go home.